I'd moved to Kuala Lumpur for a promotion. The money was insane. The apartment, a penthouse unit, overlooking the Petronas Towers, was something out of a magazine. I was the new regional director for a major tech firm. It had been a brutal 6-month fight to get the position, and I'd beaten out 3 other candidates, all of whom had been with the company for a decade or more. I was an outsider, and I knew it. The main rival I'd crushed was a man named Faris. He'd been the interim director. He was older, intensely connected, and his family name carried weight. When the CEO announced my name, Faris didn't even look at me. He just gave a smile that didn't touch his eyes. It was a cold, flat expression that made the hairs on my neck stand up. He quietly packed his desk and left that same day. 2 weeks into the job, the pressure was immense, but I was handling it. My apartment was on the 35th floor, and I loved the silence. But then the whispers started. It began subtly while I was working late, a sound like faint, dry sand scratching near the balcony door. I assumed it was the wind, 35 stories up. Then one night, I was on a conference call at 2 a.m. The air conditioning was off, but I felt a sudden, sharp drop in temperature. I saw the papers on my mahogany desk start to vibrate. The vibrating escalated until a heavy, framed photo of my parents flew off the table and shattered against the far wall. I literally jumped out of my chair. The client on the other end of the line asked, "Are you okay? What was that noise?" "Just the wind," I lied, my heart hammering against my ribs. I froze. I picked up the pieces, my hands shaking. The window was locked. No wind could have done that. I wish I could unsee that security footage from the shock opener. But there was more. The strange events got personal. I'd come home to find objects missing and then reappearing in plain sight. My expensive watch would be gone for hours, only to be found in the microwave. My passport, needed for a trip to Singapore, vanished. I searched the entire apartment, convinced I was losing it. The night before the flight, it was sitting directly on my pillow, a place I'd checked 5 times. That was a mini cliffhanger. Was this a stressed hallucination? Or was someone breaking into a secured penthouse? I called the building manager and demanded to see the security feed. He was reluctant, but I used my corporate leverage. I specifically asked for the footage from the night the photo frame broke. When I saw the video, there was no break-in, no faulty wiring, just my desk and then the photo frame, violently ripped from its stand by nothing visible. My blood ran cold. The security manager, an old Malay man with kind eyes, cleared his throat and told me, "Sir, there are things in this country, things that don't need a key. You have angered someone powerful." He then did the most unsettling thing. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, red-stained piece of cloth tied with a black cord. "Find out who wants you gone," he whispered, "and go to the right person, or this black magic will be the last thing you see." The next few days were a blur of fear and paranoia. I couldn't focus on work. Every meeting felt like an interrogation. I kept staring at Faris's old, empty corner office. It was a spacious room with a view almost as good as mine, but it felt cold, dead. I started to believe the security manager. This wasn't a break-in or a practical joke. This was black magic, sihir or ilmu, hitam, and it was focused entirely on destroying me. The invisible attacks escalated. One morning I was getting ready for the gym. I opened the bathroom cabinet and a tiny, silver key was sitting on the very top shelf where I kept my toothbrush. It was a cheap, generic key, not for my apartment or my car. It was just there. I tossed it aside, feeling a tremor of disgust. Later that day, I was driving my car on the highway when the music volume suddenly maxed out. The speakers screamed a high-pitched static that hurt my ears. I slammed the brake, nearly causing a pileup. When I tried to turn the volume down, the knob wouldn't move. I had to pull over and switch the car off and on again to reset the system. The security manager's warning haunted me. I knew I couldn't go to the police. How do you report a haunting or a djinn attack? I needed a name. I needed to know the enemy. I decided to violate corporate policy and dig into the company, files for Faris's history. It took me a full night of coding and password cracking to get into the deep archives. I pulled up his disciplinary record, his performance reviews, everything. That's when I hit the pattern break. There were notes about his sudden, unscheduled leave 3 years ago. The reason listed was personal cultural obligation. But attached was a scanned copy of a police report. It wasn't about Faris, but his brother. The brother had been arrested for practicing a dangerous form of occultism, Bomo, in a rural village outside of Kuantan. The police investigation mentioned strange rituals and the illegal use of human remains in magic. The case was dropped, but the evidence was chilling. Faris had a direct connection to black magic. I felt a dizzying cold rush. It wasn't just a disgruntled rival. It was a man who used a dark, real power against his enemies. I ran back to my apartment. I needed to see if the djinn was still there. I was terrified, but I needed proof. I walked straight into the kitchen, grabbed a heavy antique butcher knife, and marched into the living room. I froze. The light was flickering. Then I heard it. A faint, low sound that seemed to come from the walls themselves. A sound like a woman crying, but backwards. I held the knife, my knuckles white. The temperature in the room dropped again, so sharply that I could see my own breath. I looked towards the dark corridor leading to the bedrooms. A thin black shadow, too tall, too angular to be human, was standing at the edge of the hallway. It was just a silhouette, but I felt its eyes on me. Its eyes were the taste of metal. It was a metallic, iron-like smell that I could only associate with the presence of this entity. I couldn't move. I wanted to scream, but my throat was closed. I dropped the knife. It hit the marble floor with a loud clang. The sound startled the entity. The black shadow didn't move towards me. It didn't lunge, it simply retreated back into the darkness of the hall, as if the sharp noise was painful to it. The metallic smell vanished. The temperature normalized. I needed to find the man who gave me the warning. I needed the security manager. I needed the Bomo he knew. I drove recklessly through the city to the office building. Arriving just past midnight, I rushed to the security office, but it was locked. I banged on the door. No answer. I called his desk phone repeatedly. Nothing. Finally, I went to the lobby guard. "Where's the night manager?" "The old man in Zulkifli?" I demanded, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. The young guard looked confused. "Sir Enchik Zulkifli? He was transferred last week to the basement archives. He complained of a headache and they found him, bleeding from his ears." "He's hurt?" "No, sir. He's fine, he's in the basement." He's been asking everyone for his missing key. I felt the blood drain from my face. I remembered the key on my toothbrush shelf. I knew instantly it wasn't a coincidence. I turned around. And that's when, mini cliffhanger, I saw a note pinned to the corkboard next to the time clock. It was in Malay, a rough, shaky scrawl. I used my phone translator. "The key is only for his door. The djinn has a lock." The note was clear. "The key is only for his door. The djinn has a lock." My hands were shaking so bad, I almost dropped my phone reading the translation. I knew the silver key I'd found on my toothbrush shelf wasn't a coincidence. It was the lock. I slammed the phone back in my pocket and bolted toward the service elevator, heading straight for the basement archives. I had to talk to Enchik Zulkifli. He was the only one who understood. The basement level was nothing like the polished, 21st century tower above it. It smelled like stagnant water and moldy concrete. The lighting was weak, flickering tubes buzzing a deafening, constant complaint. I found the archives, a claustrophobic space lined with towering metal filing cabinets. Zulkifli was hunched over a desk surrounded by dusty old employee records. He looked terrible. His skin was pale and waxy, and he kept gently dabbing a tissue at his ear, which was still bleeding a slow, dark trickle. "Enchik Zulkifli," I whispered, rushing over. "It's me, the regional director." "I have it." I pulled the small, generic silver key from my jeans pocket. Zulkifli's eyes, tired and sunken, widened when he saw the key. He grabbed my wrist, his grip surprisingly strong and cold. "You must be careful. This is the master's lock. The Bomo, the witch doctor who did this, he used a powerful one." I felt a genuine cold horror replacing the panic. "Tell me, Faris, is he behind this?" I found the notes about his brother and the occultism. Zulkifli nodded slowly, a deep weariness in his face. "Faris's family has used this darkness for generations. They call it Ilmu Hitam, black knowledge. When Faris lost his ambition, his pride, he didn't just quit. He paid the price to a very old Bomo in the mountains. He told the spirit to take your success, your career, your life. He explained the entity wasn't just a simple djinn. It was a Hantu Raya, the great ghost or the master djinn. It's a type of spirit that serves a master, Faris, and in return, it takes a piece of the victim's life force or their luck. But Faris's mistake was setting the Hantu Raya loose in my apartment, using the key as its tether. The key? It is a physical representation of the spell's attachment to your life in that tower, Zulkifli explained. It locks the jinn to the apartment, making you the target when you enter. That's why you found it on your shelf. The spirit wanted you to find its leash. He reached out, his hand trembling. This Hantu Raya is not just a fear machine. It's tangible. It throws things, it hurts the body, and it feeds on the fear it creates. It's trying to drive you insane, but if you stay, it will kill you. I looked at the silver key, now feeling heavy and sinister in my palm. Why my name? I'd find out soon. What about you? Did Faris do this to you for warning me? Zulkifli shook his head, a gesture of profound resignation. The Hantu Raya knew I helped you. It did this to silence me. It attacked my health. The spirit itself is not contained by walls. When you brought that key here, you brought the jinn's attention. Suddenly, the air in the archives grew heavy and cold. The buzzing of the lights intensified, then cut out with a blinding pop. We were plunged into absolute darkness, illuminated only by the weak screen glow of my phone. I could smell the metallic, irony odor that I now recognized as the Hantu Raya's presence. It's here, Zulkifli breathed, his voice a terrified rasp. You brought the key. A loud grinding noise started down the aisle. It sounded like something huge dragging heavy metal. I pointed my phone's flashlight. At the far end of the row, a 3-foot-tall stack of sealed corporate boxes filled with decades of old documents and weighing hundreds of pounds began to slide across the concrete floor toward us. It moved with a slow, deliberate scrape. There was no one behind it, no wires, just a sheer massive push. Zulkifli grabbed my arm and tried to pull me toward a fire exit. I stumbled, and as I did, I instinctively clutched the silver key in my hand. It instantly became burning hot, searing my skin. The intense heat shot a sharp, blinding pain up my arm. I cried out and dropped it. The moment the key hit the floor, the sliding stack of boxes slammed into a metal locker with the force of a car crash. The filing cabinets nearby began to shake violently, threatening to topple over. Zulkifli stared at the key on the floor, his face pale with horror. You must pick it up! I saw the black towering shadow at the edge of the light, now much closer than it was in my apartment. It was a shifting, undulating mass, and it was focusing its entire malice on the small silver key. The Hantu Raya was trying to reclaim its lock. The black shadow was closer now. It was no longer a silhouette, but a shifting, denser coil of night air, standing over the tiny silver key on the concrete floor. The air was thick with that metallic, irony smell like a fresh, massive flow of blood. The Hantu Raya wanted its lock back, and it was using tons of corporate documents as its weapon. Pick it up, hurry! Zulkifli screamed, his voice raw. The file cabinets next to him were shuddering, their metal sides flexing inward. I knew if they fell, they'd crush him. I had maybe 3 seconds. I lunged forward, ignoring the metallic stench and the profound cold. I snatched the key off the ground. It was scalding hot. It felt like picking up a white-hot piece of steel. I yelled, not from fear, but from the actual, searing pain that instantly blistered my palm. I held it tight, stuffing it into the front pocket of my jeans. The moment the key left the floor, the violent shaking stopped. The terrifying grind of the boxes sliding toward us also instantly ceased. Silence. A brief, terrifying silence proving that the physical manifestation of the jinn was directly tied to that small object. But the relief lasted less than a heartbeat. The dark mass of the Hantu Raya didn't vanish. It grew taller, stretching up to the ceiling. It didn't need the key anymore because I had claimed it. Zulkifli stared past me, his eyes wide and vacant with pure terror. It sees you, Tuan. It knows you hold the leash. You have trapped yourself. I didn't understand. What are you talking about? It's locked to the apartment. The key is not for the apartment, you idiot. Zulkifli shrieked, his voice breaking. He was freaking out now, pointing a shaking finger at the shadow that towered over us. It's the key to your door, your life. The Bomo didn't just curse the place. He cursed the new owner. It was a one-time ritual. You took the key, you took the curse. That was the twist. The Hantu Raya wasn't Faris's servant looking for Faris's enemy. It was a curse looking for its target. By taking the key, I had confirmed myself as the target, making the black magic complete. It was a terrifying legal loophole of the occult world. The shadow mass moved. It was a pattern break. It didn't try to retrieve the key or throw another box. Instead, it moved impossibly fast. a blur of dark energy that slammed itself directly into the bank of metal. Filing cabinets behind Zulkifli. The cabinets, heavy and loaded with paper, didn't just fall, they exploded sideways. The sharp, heavy metal crushed Zulkifli instantly. The sickening crack was followed by a wet, gurgling sound. "No!" I shouted. I was paralyzed, staring at the ruined metal and the crushed man. The Hantu Raya didn't even look at him. It turned its attention back to me, the dark mass shuddering with triumphant, silent malice. I could hear whispers now. Not backwards, but in a low, sibilant hiss that was undeniably my name. "Jacob, Jacob." I turned. I ran. I didn't care where the fire exit was. I just ran past the rows of metal and concrete, my heart exploding in my chest. I could hear the heavy, dragging footsteps echoing behind me. This was the maximum danger. The Hantu Raya was physically chasing me, a tangible monster fueled by corporate jealousy and dark magic. I sprinted toward the main service stairs. I shoved the heavy fire door open and didn't even look back. I started climbing 3 steps at a time, up from the darkness. As I cleared the basement level, I slammed the fire door shut. I leaned against the cold concrete of the stairwell, panting, the metallic odor slowly receding as I gained distance. I felt a faint, pulsating heat against my thigh. It was the key in my pocket. I pulled it out. My palm was red and raw, but the key wasn't just hot. It was vibrating, and it was starting to turn a dull, unsettling black. The black magic was consuming the lock, linking the Hantu Raya to me permanently. I had escaped the basement, but I hadn't escaped the jinn. I had just taken its prison with me. I burst out of the office building and onto the street, breathing in the polluted, humid Kuala Lumpur night air. I was shaking, my palm searing from the silver key pressed against my leg. I was no longer running from a disgruntled rival. I was running from a Hantu Raya, a physical, tangible demon of black magic that had just crushed an innocent man to death because I held its leash. I couldn't go back to the apartment. That was its core territory. I didn't know what to do with the key. If I dropped it, the Hantu Raya would claim it and return to the apartment, only to use that lock to target me again later. If I kept it, I was carrying a walking curse. I needed to destroy it. I needed to break the physical connection of the spell. I drove out of the city, heading toward the industrial zones. I needed heat. Extreme heat. I remembered seeing a roadside metal fabrication shop, the kind that dealt with heavy machinery and welding. I pulled up to the only open shed. The place smelled of oil, burnt metal, and ozone. An old man, the welder, looked up from his work, his face dark with grease. "I need a favor," I said, my voice hoarse. "I need you to melt this." I pulled the now dull, blackened silver key out of my pocket. It was still radiating heat. The welder, a sturdy man named Ali, frowned. "It's just a small key, why the rush?" "It's not just a key," I insisted, throwing a huge wad of cash onto his workbench. "It's cursed. Melt it now, please." Ali, eyeing the money and my desperate, sweat-soaked face, finally agreed. He picked up the key with heavy-duty tongs and shoved it deep into the roaring, blinding heart of his industrial forge. The intense orange flame swallowed the small object. I stood back, watching the heat, feeling a glimmer of hope that this terrifying ordeal was finally over. As the key began to glow cherry red, the air in the shed dropped in temperature instantly. The thick metal walls began to vibrate with a low, deep hum, like a giant tuning fork had been struck nearby. Ali looked confused, stepping away from the forge. "What is that sound?" he asked, looking around wildly. The sound intensified. It wasn't coming from the forge. It was coming from everywhere. The metallic irony stench flooded the shed, stronger and more sickening than ever before. Suddenly, the arc welder, Ali, had been using flew off the workbench and slammed against the far wall. The power to the shop went out with a screeching pop. Total darkness, save for the incredible, unnatural glow of the key in the forge. I knew the Hantu Raya was there. It was furious. I was destroying its lock. I could see the shadow again, now manifesting not as a standing man, but as a vast, shimmering sheet of dark energy that covered the ceiling of the entire workshop. It was attempting to suppress the heat. I could feel the cold radiating down, fighting the forge's fire. The key, which should have been liquid by now, was simply glowing, vibrating, and resisting the meltdown. Ali was screaming in terror. He scrambled to find his phone. I rushed toward the forge. The key, now impossibly hot, was finally starting to distort. turning into a twisted, dripping bead of metal. In a final, desperate burst of power, the Hantu Raya made a massive, direct physical strike. A heavy 300-pound engine block sitting on a pulley system nearby was violently jerked off its hook. It swung like a wrecking ball aimed directly at me. I ducked just as the engine block tore through the space where my head had been, smashing into the forge with a deafening metallic crash. The impact was enough. The forge was wrecked, but the small, molten bead of metal, the final remnant of the key, was thrown out onto the concrete floor. It was smoking, cooling rapidly, and settling into a small, jagged black shard. I grabbed a piece of thick leather from the workbench, picked up the shard, and ran. Ali was gone, probably running for his life down the main road. I drove until the sun began to rise, the taste of metal fading from the air. I stopped at a 7-Eleven, numb and exhausted. I looked at my palm. Where the key had rested, there was a deep, circular burn, the physical manifestation of the jinn's brand. A permanent scar. I pulled out the black shard. I had destroyed the key, but the magic had warped, not vanished. It wasn't the key anymore. It was just a small piece of dark, cursed metal. I still had the connection. I looked at my phone. 2 missed calls. One was the CEO urgently summoning me. The other was from Faris. I deleted the CEO's call. I opened the message from Faris. It was a single photo. A picture of the crushed metal and the ruined body of Enchik Zulkifli in the basement. The caption was only 2 words. Part 1, this didn't end there. What happened next is darker. The black shard wasn't just a remnant. It was a new, stronger connection. The Hantu Raya didn't just target me. It followed me across continents. Comment Part 2 if you want the truth. If this video hits 1K likes, I'll release the final, terrifying confrontation that changed everything.